Men leave.
Are men trash?
Men or a bear?
It's because a man done did something to her.
The bear's not gonna.
So men have been.
Men are the most horrible creatures.
Men are the problem.
Men.
Men leave.
Are men trash?
Men or a bear?
It's because a man done did something to her.
The bear's not gonna.
So men have been.
Men are the most horrible creatures.
Men are the problem.
Men.
Men leave.
Are men trash?
Men or a bear?
It's because a man done did something to her.
The bear's not gonna.
So men have been.
Men are the most horrible creatures.
Men are the problem.
Men.
Men leave.
Are men trash?
Men or a bear?
It's because a man done did something to her.
The bear's not gonna.
So men have been.
Men are the most horrible creatures.
Men are the problem.
Men.
Men leave.
Are men trash?
Men or a bear?
It's because a man.
What's up, guys? What's up? How you guys doing? So, yeah, there's this recent Jordan Peterson interview. I wanted to check it out. So I figured if I'm going to watch it, why not watch it with you guys? If any of you guys are interested, watching along with me, that would be cool. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I like this guy. It's not like I would agree with everything he says, but he's very intelligent, an academic. So, I do like listening to some of the things he says, and I find it's very agreeable to a lot of things he says, but not everything. But why not? It's a good way to, in my opinion, expand your knowledge. Learn things, or hear how you can articulate certain things, hear certain point of views, and it helps me with my shaping my viewpoints in certain things too. So I figured, why not watch him too? So yeah, so I'm watching it. If you guys like it, cool. If you guys don't, understandable. But I was thinking about watching something. No. Let's check it out. Let's watch it. Now, who knows? Sometimes I've been getting for these certain kind of videos strikes. I don't know, copyright strikes. So fair use, hopefully. But if not, I'll probably have it play in the background, just audio, and I'll have some kind of image playing. So if that happens, be forewarned. That's probably what is happening. If I get a strike or something. So hopefully I don't. Hopefully this is free use. Hopefully I can react to it on on stream. Hopefully. So let's check it out.
Does mean, at least to some degree, always asking, what am I doing wrong? What do I have to give up? What do I have to let go of? What do I have?
I'm sure you hear this a lot as well. They feel that they're surrounded by toxicity, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's online. They feel like they're in a space where they can't become more. They at least from their perspective.
Well, I think some of that's actually a technical problem, and I think it's an extremely serious problem in our society. So we've invented these new communication technologies, which we're utilizing now. And the long-form discussions seem to be pretty radically on the positive side of that, I would say. But the discourse on places like Twitter, Facebook, in comment sections and so forth is pretty degenerate. And I think the reason for that is that the evolved mechanisms that we use in face-to-face real-world discourse have been stripped away in the electronic domain. And the problem with that is twofold. The first problem is the exploitative, sadistic psychopaths have free reign because they're not held responsible for their utterances. They're anonymous. They get rewarded for the propagation of their emotionally arousing material. The algorithms will capitalize on it. And that's a very toxic combination. And then the anonymity as well, like we know perfectly well from a vast array of psychological experiences that normal people anonymized are much more likely to let the negative part of their character have free reign. And so I really see this as a technical problem, is that societies and psyches are always threatened by what they call the dark tetrad personality proclivities: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, that's parasitical predatory. A parasitical predator is a psychopath, and sadism. And you have those impulses within you, and there are people who are primarily characterized by those motivations. We have evolved mechanisms for keeping that under control, but they're all dispensed with in social media. And so what seems to be happening is the dark tetrad types are hijacking the political discourse on the right and the left, polarizing and dividing and capitalizing on that. And it's catastrophic socially and psychologically, but they benefit from the ensuing chaos by attracting attention to themselves in a manner that's undeserved and counterproductive. I think the danger in that is sufficient that it's civilization threatening. I mean, we can't underestimate the power of these.
Yo, Terminator, thank you for stopping by. I do think this is a thing where the whole anonymous, that you don't know who's commenting and shit like that, is unproductive. It's unproductive. I mean, especially when you have a countering viewpoint. Cam up, make content, give your opinion, give a face to your words. That's the thing where it's great that you have disagreements, but you never have the guts to show your face in these disagreements. You don't say nothing. You're quiet. Showing your face, you're quiet. But when you're anonymous, you don't show nothing. Oh, you can say a whole lot of crap. I think that's to your character. You know, that you lack character at all. That you can't stand. You can't. Your argument does not hold up.
Electronically mediated communication networks. They're insanely powerful, and they amplify people to a degree that's almost unimaginable. And so the manipulators and the bad actors have disproportionate influence. On our Peterson Academy website, we have a social media network, and we're trying to incorporate all the features of social media networks that have made them attractive. But our system differs from, let's say, Twitter. Why? Well, there's a payment barrier. And you might say, well, I would rather it was free. It's like, free, eh? If it's free, you're the product. And if it's free, there's zero barrier to your exploitation, right? So the bad actors, I think this is probably a rule. In a social communication system that's free, the psychopaths come to dominate because they can take it. It's not free because you're devoting your attention, and attention is valuable. And the bad actors can take advantage of your attention and pay zero price. Well, if you set up a system where actors can take advantage of your attention for zero price, the psychopaths are going to dominate. So one of the things we might hypothesize, I don't know if it's true, is that there should be a price barrier to all social media interactions. If it's free, the bad actors will dominate. And then the other thing we're trying to do is to, encourage and reward positive interactions, but we're also going to take the responsibility of identifying the small number of people who will repetitively misbehave and just ask them to leave. Now, that raises the specter of something approximating censorship, let's say, but I don't think it's reasonable to draw a direct line between censorship and not putting up with immature psychopaths. Like, that's not the same thing. It's not opinion-based. I've been attacked by the psychopathic types on the left and on the right. It's politically agnostic. And so
the average mind, how do we not let ourselves become consumed by believing that is reality when that's what we're exposed to?
I don't know. I don't know how you do that. I mean, I think part of that might be realizing that is happening. It'd be useful for people to familiarize themselves with the symptoms of what's called cluster B psychopathology: borderline personality disorder, narcissism, psychopathy, antisocial personality, histrionic personality, to know who those people are. And to start to become aware of that. I think that's actually harder for people on the left. And the reason for that, I believe, is that agreeableness tilts people towards the radical left, because agreeable people are highly empathic and they tend to think of anyone who's suffering as a victim. The problem with that attitude is that it doesn't arm you very well with an understanding of evil, because truly malevolent people camouflage themselves as victims and they take advantage of the empathic. And that's a big problem, because the last thing you want to do if you're truly empathic is enable the sadists, right? And there's no shortage of that. We know, for example, there's a developing psychological literature that shows that the active anonymous troll types are much more likely to be characterized by dark tetrad traits.
Is there a way that we can affect that at more of a root level so that those
Well,
aren't
I
created
think
in
that
the
one of
first
the
place.
things that social media operators should do is they should separate the anonymous accounts from the verified accounts. So, for example, I would like to see it on Twitter where the verified accounts, you see their comments, and then there's a hidden space underneath, which is anonymous accounts. And if you want to click on that and look through what the troll demons have to say, you can. It's a little trip to hell. You're not required to do it. And they're separated from the people who will stake their reputation on their words, which is what you do when you genuinely identify yourself. Now the anonymous types like to say, well, anonymity is necessary because in a tyrannical state, only the anonymous can tell the truth. And my experience with that is that for every 1 in 10,000 brave anonymous whistleblowers, there's 9,999 sadistic Machiavellians. And so you might think that you're a brave truth teller in the confines of your anonymous, demonically named account, but probably you're just a sadistic troublemaker.
That's the thing where I believe if you are willing to risk whatever, I will believe your words more. Here's the thing where, honestly, where I come into this, where, in my opinion, I don't care if people hate me. I've had TikTok ban my account plenty of times. I've had, strikes and all that stuff. It's like, okay, I'm still going to speak my mind. That's the thing where there's certain things that, you're not allowed to say or people will frown upon. But if you risk it all, I'll give you more respect.
So I think that would and then the other issue, it probably is cost. Like free, first of all, free is an illusion because there's nothing that's free. At least you're paying with your attention and your time. It's not free.
Your data, yeah.
And well, that's the next thing. You're also paying with your identity and all your behavioral data, right? And so none of that's free. And so that's an illusion. And I think one of the things we have observed with Peterson Academy, because the social interactions there are very positive and pretty much universally so. It hopefully will establish that as a cultural convention, right? But I'm certain that a fair part of that is just that you can't produce 100 troll accounts for nothing and do nothing but cause trouble, because at minimum, it's going to cost you some money. So I think we can probably dispense with maybe 80% of the bad actors just by not making it free. So no one knows, right? This is why I have sympathy, let's say, for people like Mark Zuckerberg and for Elon Musk sort of equally, even though they're not necessarily on the same side of the political spectrum. It's like Zuckerberg gets hauled to Congress and raked over the coals, but it isn't like as if we can assume that he knows how to solve this problem, because the psychopathic parasite problem is really, really old. And those sorts of people are very good at manipulating communication networks. And there's no reason to assume that some of them aren't equally good in the new technologies. And Musk's approach is something like a radical free speech approach. But like I just sat with one of my friends here actually this morning, this is Greg Hurwitz I was telling you about, and he's done some forensic investigations, first of all, indicating how much of the troll activity on social media networks is funded by international actors, Iran topping the list, let's say, which is, unbelievably horrible. And then how much of the pathological content is generated by a very small number of bad actors with disproportionate influence. 20 bad actors on Twitter, like seriously malevolent people who are working to cause trouble full time. They can punch way above their weight, way above their weight. Not good.
And there's no saving them.
Well, the terrifying thing is, and women should know this, is like the guys that are just out for a good time, they're not much fun. And they're a lot. Psychopathologies are notoriously resistant to psychotherapeutic intervention. I mean, first of all, this kind of goes back to the discussion of pride. They're very unlikely to come for counseling because, and if they do, they're the sort of people, and I'm dead serious about this, they're likely to announce themselves as the sort of person that the therapist is very lucky to be interacting with. Right, that there's no doubt that this will be at least as advantageous for the therapist as for the client, and that they're the sort of special person who has graced this office with their presence. And that's not a word of exaggeration. I had some pretty unpleasant child molesting psychopaths, for example, in my clinical practice. And the one that I remember most particularly was unbelievably good at putting himself forward as a pillar of a devoted, misunderstood pillar of the community. Like it was just his constant refrain, absolutely unteachable. And antisocial personality is notoriously resistant to psychotherapeutic intervention. It's the same with histrionic, borderline, narcissistic. It's unbelievably stable personality trait.
What's your aim and potential target with an individual like that? Like, where could your practice even take
Well,
someone
what
like
I
that?
did try when I had those people, and that was often court mandated, and I would never, I think court mandated psychotherapy is a contradiction in terms because you have to come there voluntarily for it to work. My approach with people like that was to appeal to something like their more extended self-interest, which would be, well, I don't know if you noticed there, buddy, but you know, your constant interference with children has decimated your marriage and your family, and you've been in prison for it, and you know, people are on to you. And so a wise narcissistic psychopath might tone it down a bit, but I wouldn't claim for a moment that that had any effect whatsoever. You know, the degree of cynicism that characterizes someone like that is it's very difficult to develop an appreciation for evil. It's not a fun place to go. And to do it properly, you also have to start to recognize it in your...
You know, that's the thing where I think people, mainly women, shooting around the whole narcissistic personality, they are pretty much desensitizing that word. This is a thing where I pretty much like almost every woman I hear who breaks up with their man say, "Oh, he's a narcissist. He's a narcissist." It's a clinically diagnosed thing. To constantly say every single man you've dated was a narcissist, it's like you don't know the true. Honestly, they don't know the true meaning of it, because it's by hearing Peterson talks about it, it's a borderline dangerous thing, and that's why I think a lot of women just throwing around these words is just absolutely idiotic.
yourself. And that is not pleasant. And as I said, for example, the naive empathic types, they really do believe that most of the criminals are misunderstood victims. And you know, what's terrible about that is that some of the criminals are misunderstood victims. You know, there are people in prison who, under duress of various sorts, made one extremely stupid mistake and ended up seriously punished for it. Okay, so let's just put those people off the table. We can ignore them. 1% of the criminals commit 65% of the crimes. Okay, so those are the people that we're looking at. Recalcitrant repeat offenders with a proclivity for violence. Okay, can you repair them? No.
1% commits 60% of the crime. This is a thing where I always hate the narrative that men are dangerous. Men commit predominantly all the crime. This is a thing that it's like the narrative is so dangerous when in actuality only a small percent of men commit crime. A small percent of men. Yes, men abuse crimes are committed by men. Yes, but it's not. I mean, the majority of abuse crimes are committed by men. But there's a difference between majority of men commit abuse crimes. That's the thing. And women like to believe in the latter. Women like to create the narrative as the latter. And that is such a dangerous thing where I hate that thing, because it's constantly the media, the women's propaganda. It's just painting a nasty, disgusting image of men. And
the standard penological theory is that part of their problem is actually delayed maturation for whatever reason. You just put them in prison till they're in their late 20s, and then they're much less likely to reoffend. Why? Did they learn? That's one way of thinking about it. They're less impulsive and sensation-seeking as a consequence of maturity, and likely some of it is just delayed maturity. But it has very little to do with rehabilitation, and a lot to do with age. You know, the male crime curve spikes at 15, and even among normal males, let's say, they're much more likely to misbehave as testosterone and maturation kick in, and then you see a return to something approximating normal behavior, usually by the time of 24 or 25, when men take on more of the mature responsibilities of life. And the criminal pattern is approximately equivalent to that, although the lag to maturity is longer. But no, there's no evidence that I find credible that the cluster B psychopathologies are amenable to psychotherapeutic intervention. I don't think so.
Yeah.
And they're also generally a very, 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 very you need a lot of varies to make that right. Very difficult population to work with.
Yeah,
and you do that at your peril.
Yeah, I think listening to you, the idea of false compassion can be used so against us, and an immature level of the development of empathy and compassion is easily taken advantage of.
Well, we know this
Yeah.
because one of the things we know, for example, is so the dark tetrad males are differentially attractive to women, but mostly younger and naive women. Okay, so why? Well, the typical dark tetrad type is very confident and not anxious. Okay, so why would that be attractive to women? Because men who are competent in their domain are
The dark tetra. That's very interesting.
confident and not anxious. What the predatory psychopaths do is mimic that, and naive women can't tell the difference, and so they can be more attracted to the dark tetrad types, especially when they're young. And then there's the additional complication that the even more pathological dark tetrad types are very good at appealing to empathy by making claims of victimization. It's a nasty game, and the people who are good at it, they're better at it than you are at detecting it. I knew Robert Hare. Robert Hare was the first clinical psychologist who really delved into psychopathy and non-clinical psychopathy. And he recorded 200 conversations with like brutal criminal psychopaths. And he was quite an agreeable person, Robert Hare. And he said invariably that while he was talking to them, they had him convinced. And it wasn't until afterwards when he was watching the videos that he could see the tricks. And that's because these people are watching you more than you're watching them. And they're seeing which tricks work on you. And that's the goal of the game. Like if I was doing that to you, I'd be thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get this guy to smile more, right? I'm going to see if I'm going to see which lies I can get him to swallow. Because then I'd be testing you, let's say, for your gullibility. And so I'd start out with a little lie and watch you. And then if you swallowed it, I'd get a good boost of superiority, which is partly what I'm after. And then I'd try another lie. And if you detected that, well, I'd move in another direction, sort of map you for your gullibility. And then I'd find out how you could be exploited. And that'd be the whole purpose of the conversation. Yeah. And then add to that the fact that I've practiced that for 30 years and that maybe I'm as smart as you are, or possibly.
You know, what he's talking about, it's a theory that I have, or that I've been constantly talking about when it comes to charm. When it comes to charm, I've said this countless times before, where a lot of women don't realize charm. You're not born with charm. Men aren't born with charm. In my opinion, most men are socially awkward. Most men aren't charming. Most men aren't good with words. They aren't the smooth talkers. They aren't, they're not going to charm you out of your pants. The men that are charming, the men that are truly charming, he knows how to talk. He knows how to, he understands you well. He knows how to essentially manipulate you, your feelings. He understands your feelings, all this stuff. Truly charming men. Guess what? Those charming men, more than likely, high body counts because they've done it. They've used their charm for a long time because they've practiced it, they've worked it out, and they've used it. So using that charm to manipulate women, to get with women, and again, I'm not saying all cases, but I'm saying the logical outcome of it. When you gain, when you experience, when you develop the charm, you're using it. You're using it, and what are you using it for? A lot of times to manipulate others, and in some cases, and probably a lot of cases, manipulate women to get with them in relationships, in sexual encounters. So again, men that are charming, well, they are essentially high body count men, well experienced men, men that know how to manipulate women, knows how to talk to women. It's usually the players, the bad boys, the Pookies, the Ray Rays, the Chads. Those men know how to talk to women, know how to get women to, fall for them.
Possibly smarter, right? I mean, depends on the situation, but
how does a woman even begin to detect or notice the difference?
Well, part of the way that women have done that historically is by not going out with people they don't know, right? That aren't part of their social network, And one of the things about the psychopathic predators is that they're not very good at maintaining social connections. And so,
wow, that's huge, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, the dating apps and that sort of thing, they're a complete open playing ground for the psychopathic types. There's something even worse about this, actually. So the sexual revolution was predicated on the idea that we could alter female reproduction patterns so that they could act like men, basically, because men are more likely to take a short-term mating opportunity. And the promise of reliable birth control was that that avenue of possibility would be open to women. Okay. And you might say, well, why not? Because, you know, sexuality is pleasurable, and if you could reduce the cost, why not do it? All right, so that's what we've been experimenting with for 60 years. Okay, well, one reason is that hormonal birth control alters females' perceptions. So women on the pill don't like masculine men as much. And what that's done to us politically and sociologically, no one knows. It's a big deal, and we don't know.
I mean, I've heard that. I've heard how being on the pill, you can like one type of man. Being off it, you would like a different type of man. That is amazing. That's the thing where, you know, we downplay hormones a lot. We really downplay hormones a lot. How it affects you mentally, we don't study it enough. But being on birth control pill, you would dislike masculine men? That's crazy.
But the other thing that's happened is, so imagine that you could imagine male reproductive strategies as being on a continuum. There are men who are more inclined towards long-term committed monogamous relationships, and there are men who are more committed to short-term hedonistic pleasure-seeking relationships. All right, so now imagine you took these men and you analyzed their personalities, and you took these men and analyzed their personalities. Well, that's been done. The men who prefer short-term mating opportunities are psychopathic, narcissistic, Machiavellian, and sadistic. Right. So one of the unintended consequences of the sexual revolution is that the freed up women have been delivered to the psychopathic.
That's the thing where, like, the things he said was, this is why I've said, high body count is a detriment to both people, both men and women. Yes, the difference is that women like men with high body counts. Because essentially, these men are the ones who are the charmers, who are either the good-looking ones, who are either the wealthy ones. They can get women. So, no duh, they have high body counts. But, here's the thing. These men that have high body counts have a high likelihood, most likely, like he said, they're psychopathic. They're Machiavellian. They are usually mentally unstable, in the sense that, who knows, right? They're manipulative. They are just, they are very, what do I say? Emotionally damaging. That's one thing. Yo, Parasocial, what's up, bro?
Men. Right. And what's the consequence of that? We don't know. We don't know. We know that young people are less likely to have relationships. We know that the birth rate has plummeted. We know that people are much less likely to get married. How much of that is a consequence of the destabilization of the reproductive pattern by hormonal birth control? No one knows. Mm-hmm. It's not like it was a minor revolution, right? It was a major technological revolution. But the terrifying thing is, and women should know this, is like the guys that are just out for a good time, they're not much fun. And they're a lot worse than you think. And the worst of them are so much worse than you think that if you ever got to look inside their mind, you would never recover. And I'm not saying that lightly. It's not pleasant. Like, the worst of terrible people are so bad. I'm not making this up. Most people who have post-traumatic stress disorder don't have it because they were hurt. They have it because they encountered someone who wanted to hurt them, right? And so it was that glimpse of that malevolent.
Wow, that is crazy. That is crazy. That's the thing where, you know, these are the things where we don't. This is why. Here's the thing where people may stick me with, like, I don't know, red pill and shit like that, but I've stand on it. I've never been big supporter of men having high body counts. Because again, it affects you. It affects you mentally. It honestly unstables your mindset, in my opinion. So jumping in deep.
That fractured them. It wasn't, people can go through all sorts of horrible things and not be traumatized. You know, a terrible illness, terrible pain, an accident. You wait till you tangle with someone who's malevolent. Boy, you will not be the same person afterward, assuming you manage to put yourself back together at all. So this is not, and it's many of those people too that have free reign online. It's not a good thing.
You brought up identity, and I feel that so much of our subscription to ideas of identity are somewhat subconscious. And I'm not sure anyone's ever, at least not that I know, the scale of people who are thinking about their life in a logical way to say, let me think about what my identity is. I think we join communities, we join groups, we leave communities, we leave groups, we sign up to this, we unsubscribe from that. We don't even recognize that we're subconsciously crafting an identity by the people we spend time with and the people we listen to. It often isn't as, it isn't as
that's what stories, by the way, that's a good observation. I mean, one of the things I've realized, and one of the themes that is developed in this new book, is the notion that, so when you're introduced to someone, you'll tell them a story about who you are. So you describe your identity. A story is a description of that implicit identity that you described. So you see the world through a structure of identity. That doesn't mean you know what that is, as you pointed out. When you tell a story about yourself, what you're trying to do is to approximate, you're trying to encapsulate that implicit identity into something that's communicable, and then something that also becomes explicitly understandable to you.
I'm always in awe of the human mind. The things that humans can do, it really fascinates me because we can do some fuck up shit. And to be honest, marrying our enemy and stuff, I always think that a lot of us are ignorant to people's mindset, to the minds of other people. We can't realize the depth of I don't know, I wouldn't say evil, but just, we don't realize we don't realize the good with the bad. So a lot of times this is why I honestly say one of the things that I want to promote is that we need to stop ignoring red flags. We really do. Because honestly, ignoring red flags is a detriment to us. Because these actions, this way of doing things, we recognize the red flags, yet we constantly ignore them, and then it always fails us.
This is partly what dreams do. So in the dream, your implicit identity reveals itself, but not entirely coherently and not entirely verbally. If you take a dream and you interpret it, if you have the good fortune to be able to manage that and maybe some help, you're moving the information that's part of your implicit identity upward into something that's more explicitly recognized. Like, what you'd hope is that what you're actually pursuing, pre-consciously or unconsciously, is mapped very well by your self-description, right? Because then you're a person that has a certain degree of integrity. Who you think you are and who you are the same thing. That's an optimal situation. That's the pursuit of something like integrity, say, in moral development, maybe in psychotherapy, in a relationship that's positive and productive. It's all moving towards that end. And
speaking of integrity, that is one of the things that I'm striving to. I admit, I have made plenty of mistakes in my youth. And I could say that when I've looked back on who I was disappointed in myself. I was extremely disappointed in myself. So it took some time, where I would say, more than ever now, is that I want to be who I believe I am. I want to live by the certain morality, certain principles. I want to be who I believe I could be, and just be that kind of person. This is the thing with a lot of us is like, we have to, this is why I believe self-reflection is important. I promote self-reflection. So you should, when you look at yourself, on the outside looking in, some shit like that, you should be proud of yourself. Or it's like, you shouldn't like regret something, or just, there's traits of you that, you look down upon. You should be, have some integrity, have some morality, be virtuous. That's my opinion.
It's very useful to understand that what stories do is, stories are the manner in which implicit identity makes itself explicit. And so the biblical stories, for example, are part of the process, the historical process by which the developing morality of individuals, as they become more complexly civilized, reveals itself to those cultures and to the participants. It's a dynamic process, and it's much better to understand the stories that way. You know, the atheist types tend to parody belief in God, say, as belief in something like the great genie in the sky daddy, I think, the benevolent sky daddy, which is the terminology that people like Richard Dawkins use. But that's it's a dismissive parody of the phenomena. It's not a reasonable approach because the realm of religious conceptualization is far more sophisticated than that.
I mean, he does, I would say he does talk a lot. I mean, I could say that it will fall into word salad. So for me, it's like, sometimes I like to just dissect it, or like in my own mind, maybe reinterpret it or process it a bit differently. So again, a lot of things, it maybe fall over my head or whatever. But still, I think these are things where the path of just improving your mindset, you know, it isn't a terrible thing to listen to, you know, academics, see how they think, see how they view the world, and process it yourself.
That parody would indicate. Like, I mean, let's take the idea that the divine reveals itself as the call of adventure. Well, this is a serious idea to contend with. So what it implies is that there's a spirit, so to speak, a process, a dynamic that reveals itself within us, that captures what interests us and compels us forward in consequence, and that following that, so when God comes to Abraham, he makes Abraham an offer, like a very specific to him. It's not vague at all. It says, you need to leave the comforts of your land and home, and you need to voyage out into the great unknown. So it's like a quest story, like the Hobbit say. Away you go from comfort. Well, then the first question you might ask, if you had that impulse, is, well, why? I have everything that I would need, assuming life is based on that kind of need, right at hand. So what's the benefit to me of moving beyond the zone of infantile dependence and comfort? That's a question everybody faces always, especially if they're provided for adequately or even excellently by their parents. What should impel you out into the world, and why bother? Well, God tells Abraham something very specific. He says, if you abide by the voice of adventure, you'll be a blessing to yourself. Okay, that's a good deal, because it's very frequently the case that people don't have an existence that's a blessing to them. They suffer a lot. They're anxious, they're grief-stricken, they're resentful, they're angry, they're self-contemptuous, they're vicious. There's all sorts of ways that their existence is not a blessing to them. So the offer that the voice of God as adventure makes to Abraham is that if you follow this pathway of adventure, your life will you'll start to experience your life as a blessing. So that's a good deal. Just that alone, if that was true, that might be good enough to motivate you, right? To think that's okay, that's the pathway forward to self-acceptance, let's say, or something like a sophisticated self-esteem. But that's not the whole offer. The second offer is, you'll become known among your peers and validly. And that's very interesting, because, you know, you can think about people as corrupt power seekers who are clamoring for status, or you can be less cynical and you could say, well, we're wired such that we appreciate due consideration for our genuine efforts. Okay, so if my reputation is established on valid basis, that means that I'm appreciated by the people around me, but that there's a valid basis for that. That's the offer. That's part two. So you're a blessing to yourself in a manner that enhances your reputation, and you deserve it. So that's a good deal, if you could have that. Then there's another offer, which is, you'll get those two things, activity and integration.
Sometimes those are the word salad. It's like, okay, that's why, like, yes, I admit that sometimes the academics, they say things that are just like, okay, I don't know how that really applies to average life, but okay.
Into the broader social community. Well, I think that's right. I can't see how it can be otherwise, because the counter hypothesis would be the force that motivates you forward acts at cross purposes to, say, sociological stability. And I can't see how we could be genuinely social animals, productively social animals, which we are, and there be some intrinsic conflict between the force that moves us forward and the force that brings people together, right? Why not assume that they exist together in a kind of harmony? I mean, we're adapted to the social world. Anyways, that's one of the avenues that I had explored in We Who Wrestle with God. And there's more in the Abrahamic story that's quite remarkable too, because the other thing that Abraham, once you understand, for example, that sacrifice, at least in part, means dispensing with something you once valued but has now, right? There's no mistake in that, Right. There's no mistaking that. You want to hit the target dead center.
Absolutely.
Right, yeah.
And in the beginning of the text, his bow is slipping from his hands because he's feeling sweaty, he's feeling nervous, he's feeling anxiety,
Right.
and therefore he turns to God for instruction and guidance.
Okay, so there's a meaning there too. So psychologists have demonstrated convincingly, mostly statistically, that there's no difference between being self-conscious and being miserable. Right. They're so tightly associated. So for example, in the Big Five, in one of the classic Big Five personality descriptive processes, tests, self-consciousness is a facet of neuroticism. So it's actually a sub-element of suffering. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that if you're focused on your narrow self, what you want now, you're going to become both aimless and anxious. And that's technically the case. And so you might say, well, then what's the medication for that? And the medication isn't exactly to stop thinking about yourself because, well, then what do you?
This is where I want to dig in deeper, where I, like I said, I process it and interpret it a little bit differently or use it a little bit differently. Self-conscious, or just focusing on yourself, is the leading cause of misery. Let me play that a little bit again.
There's a meaning there too. So psychologists have demonstrated convincingly, mostly statistically, that there's no difference between being self-conscious and being miserable. Right. They're so tightly associated. So for example, in the Big Five, in one of the classic Big Five personality descriptive processes, tests, self-consciousness is a facet of neuroticism. So it's actually a sub-element of suffering. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that if you're focused on your narrow self, what you want now.
Focus on your narrow self, what you want now. Here's where I interpret this. Women. This is I'm trying to apply it to, my sphere of influence, sphere of thinking. You see this nowadays. Modern day women, the supposed happy single women, but in all reality, they are truly the ones that are most unhappy because they are the ones who are the most on antidepressants. You see this constantly on, like, you've seen the videos I've shown, right? Women asking they're talking about their dating life, all these women, because they want a certain type of man now. They want a perfect man now. But they exemplify misery. They are just hard to deal with. They are pains. They are just absolutely miserable women. So that's where I see, this is where I see, like, these are the ones that are so selfish. All they think about is themselves, what they want right now. They don't work for it, because this is the thing. Why do women want already built men? I've said this before, where honestly, one of the things I've seen to die is ride or die women. Women willingly to build with men. No, more and more women wanting already built men. But those type of women that want already built men, they are miserable. Miserable types of women. I'm not saying maybe miserable human beings, but they're miserable women. Right? Because they're probably annoying, they're probably aggressive. It's just, they are just not great to be with. And this is why a lot of those women can't find their already built man.
You're going to become both aimless and anxious. And that's technically the case. And so you might say, well, then what's the medication for that? And the medication isn't exactly to stop thinking about yourself, because, well, then what do you think about? And exactly how do you continue to maintain your care for yourself? The medication to that is to aim higher. For example, in our conversation, and you're obviously good at this because your podcast wouldn't work, you can't sit in a conversation like this and do nothing but aim at the enhancement of your own status, let's say, in the eyes of your audience, or at the expense of your guest. First of all, if you do that, you won't have guests for long and their quality will disintegrate. But also, people will see through you eventually and see you as self-serving. If, by contrast, you aim the conversation at the expansion, let's say, of your own understanding and wisdom, then it's not about you, it's about the dynamic of the conversation, and you can bring everybody along for the ride. But one of the benefits of that is you won't be self-conscious. So your hands won't sweat. You won't miss your grip on the bow. You won't aim wrong. There's almost no failure, regardless of how arbitrary, that you can't learn from. If you're a man and you're getting nowhere with women, it's very easy for you to become extremely metaphor there. So the ancient Egyptians, one of their gods, Horus, was the god of the open eye. And the Mesopotamian god Marduk, who was a savior figure, whom the emperor should model himself after, was also, he had eyes all the way around his head, so he could see. That's not the same as thinking. So to have an open eye is to attend. And so you might say, well, if you've missed your adventure, Carl Jung said, modern man doesn't see God because he doesn't look low enough, which is a very interesting way of conceptualizing. It's like one of the things I try to do in this new technology we're developing with essay, but also as a theme in We Who Wrestle with God, is to point out that you can learn to watch. So, for example, when I was dealing with depressed people in my clinical practice, and this is a pretty standard behavioral approach, is one of the things you do with depressed people is you have them track their mood, say maybe every hour during the day. Because a depressed person will assume that they're very unhappy and that that's always there. But if you get them to track it, what you find is they may be comparatively unhappy, but there is variation. So there'll be times when they're much more miserable than usual, but also times when they're less miserable. And they may not even really know when those times are without tracking it. So one of the things typically is depressed people will isolate themselves because they think they don't want to see anyone. But if you have them track their emotions, you find that when they're with other people, they're almost invariably less depressed. Okay, so imagine now I had you make a map of your emotions across a week and we associated the emotions with what you were doing. What we'd find is some of the things you were doing were making you much more depressed and some of the things less. And so then your goal, so the first goal is see that. Attend to that as if you're ignorant even with regards to your own nature. And then the next thing would be, well, how about you do a little bit more of the things that are positive and a little bit less of the things that are negative, right? And then we will remap that and see if you've moved your average mood, up the distribution. And so this is what they call the beginner's mind, at least in part in Buddhism. You want to look at the situation, which might be your own situation, as if you don't know yourself. It's like, okay, well, what am I interested in? People are often loath to even ask that question because they may find, for example, that the thing that compels them forward isn't the thing their father or mother wanted them to do. That's a very common familial story. You might be shocked at who you are. It's highly probable, just like you're shocked when you start to get to know someone else. It's the same as going to apply to you. And the rule there is something like, watch, don't assume, right? Don't put your presuppositions before the realities of your experience. All right, so he had to watch. And if you watch, you see, you can rectify your aim. Right. And so that's the difference between attention and thought. Luciferian intelligences worship their own presuppositions. Someone who's active and attentive watches, they're alert. Meditation can foster that, right? Because it teaches you to be present and awake. And so I would say to people who haven't found their calling is that they're not noticing it in its micro manifestations. It's not going to necessarily announce itself like Gandalf announced himself to the Hobbit. Right? It's going to be subtle. Things bother you. That's part of your adventure. Like there's going to be certain things that grip you and disturb you. And those are the problems that you're destined to have to contend with. And you might be annoyed about that because you think, I don't want to have any problems. It's like, no, you actually probably want to have some serious problems that you can contend with that are going to occupy you, some responsibilities. And then there'll be the things that clearly motivate your movement forward. And it's very good to start to understand what those are. To understand that that's how it works first, but then also to understand them in more detail. You can start to come to understand that by understanding your own temperament. So, for example, if you're high in neuroticism, you're going to be more concerned with safety and security. If you're agreeable, you're going to be relationship focused. If you're disagreeable, you're going to be competitive. If you're conscientious, you're going to be interested in order and productivity. If you're open, you're going to be interested in aesthetics and ideas. Well, right there, you've got a bit of a map of the territory of calling and conscience that you're going to occupy. And so you have a nature, and it's given to you, and it manifests itself in what interests you and what bothers you. And the biblical insistence, at least in part, and this is common, I think, to sophisticated religious systems of thought worldwide, is that there's an autonomy in what calls you, and what idea that the purpose of life isn't something like secure comfort. That's partly why people make so much trouble. So we're not wired for infantile secure comfort. And if we don't have a real adventure, we'll find a false one. And we'll cause a lot of trouble in that false adventure. A lot. Alcoholism, that's a false adventure. Drug abuse, that's a false adventure. Sequential parasitical love affairs, that's a false adventure. Political activism of a destructive sort.
The false adventure seems to be so alluring and intoxicating in so many ways. and naturally in the case that you're sharing, distracting as well. How does one avoid the allurements of a false adventure while they're still pursuing and uncovering?
That's a very good question. Well, I think conscience is a big part of that, because it's very frequent that people will be visited by their conscience when they do something that's hedonistically valuable in the short term. But then they think, oh, I shouldn't have done that. It's like, well, why shouldn't have you done that? Well, I cheated on my girlfriend. All right, well, you got to cheat. There's the benefit. What's the downfall? Well, I can't trust myself. I'm a liar. She can't trust me. Okay, so what's the problem with that? You want to be alone? You want to be a parasitical psychopath? Like, what's your goal here? And so part of the problem with just calling, let's say, is it can become short term, and it can entice you into false micro adventures that don't propagate well across time and that disturb other people. You said something when we were talking just before the interview started about, because I was asking you what you thought you might be doing right with regard to your podcast, say, that would account for its popularity. And you said, well, you're in it for the long run. Well, a fundamental part of...
That's the thing where I like when he touches more on the men and women dynamic. And that's the thing where I think it's important for us, certain types of men. I believe in cultivating a moral mindset. This is a thing where, to be honest, I like to hold myself to a certain kind of standard. Cheating is not really for me. This is the thing. Cheating, the whole men with high body counts, people with high body counts, open relationship, shit like that. I just don't think that leads anyone to a good, long-term, successful relationship or life, in my opinion.
Cortical maturation from a biological perspective is that you start to see things in the long run, and then you don't do things in the short term that are exciting and even adventurous that violate the propagation of the adventure across time. And you can envision it this way socially. If you and I have an honest conversation, okay, imagine that you have a guest who uses your podcast in a manipulative way. Okay, they could gain some short-term advantage, putting you down, let's say, playing a power game, using the podcast as a means to enhance their economic standing or their social standing. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, they're not going to get invited back. Well, you do that 20 times, you're done, right? Okay, so one of the ways of thinking about this, if you're trying to understand what constitutes morality, technically, is that the moral pathway, if I'm interacting with you morally, assuming you're treating yourself properly, our interactions are going to have to be of the kind that you want to voluntarily repeat. That's what you have with a friend. And there's a pattern to that, obviously, a pattern of reciprocity, a pattern of mutual aid, unless it's a pathological friendship, in which case it's likely to collapse anyways. But that's a constraint. Repeatability, voluntary repeatability across time is a real constraint. And it's something like the future, because it's across time, but it's also something like the constraint on your actions by the necessity for you to be embedded in a voluntary social framework, right? And that's a huge advantage. Like one of the things you could think about, for example, there's this game that economists play, behavioral economists. So this is how the game works. You pick two people and you say to one of them, I'm going to give you $100 and you have to split it with this person. If they accept the offer, then you get the 100 and you pay them. But if they refuse the offer, neither of you get anything. So that's the game. Now, if you play that across cultures, what you find is that regardless of socioeconomic status, people offer 50%. Okay, now this violates the tenets of classical economics, which views people as self-maximizers. Because if I'm only going to play a game with you once, I should take $99 and give you $1. And you should take $1 because, what, do you want 0 or do you want 1? But that isn't what people do. They split it 50-50. Now, then you might ask, why? Well, you don't play one-off games with people. So imagine you're doing this publicly. Okay, now everyone watches you and they see that you're a fair player. Well, then they're going to play with you if they get an opportunity. You could even say, I don't know if this has ever been tested, but you could even say, well, maybe you do a 60-40 split and you offer the person that's playing slightly more than you get. Well, you lose in that game, but if you get a reputation, that's part of that Abrahamic adventure. If you get a reputation for bending over backwards to be reciprocal, people are going to line up to play with you. And so that's why you try to teach your children to be good sports, because, you say to them, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. It matters how you play the game. And the kids thinks, what the hell do you mean? Of course it matters.
Yo, Josh, thank you for stopping by, bro. This is a thing where, to be honest, this is why in my opinion, people can live however they want to live. I prefer to live in a moral sense. because I don't want to betray myself. Yes, it's I guess like Peterson said, it's a moral construct we put, but I'd rather live by that moral construct because I'd rather not betray myself. I'd rather not betray what I believe in. Because like you can think about this: do you want to have a group of friends that are morally ambiguous, or just they're cheaters, they're just low lives, they're narcissists, they're just kind of terrible human beings? No, I don't. I'd rather be moral myself and surround myself with morally sound people, because then hopefully no one's stabbing you in the back. That's the thing. Where I'd rather live by that ideals, and I'm not thinking about these people are stabbing me in the back.
Matters if I win. Parents are usually not sophisticated enough to pursue that philosophically, but the right answer is, what good is there winning one game when you never get invited to play again? It's much better to be invited to play 100 games. And that means you're going to have to be the sort of person that other people are lining up to play with. And that's the basis. That's part of the basis of a genuine ethic. And I think raised to the philosophical level, you get something like a transcendent ethic out of that. It's biologically predicated, but it's a higher order. It's a higher order and more mature ethic, and it's real. It's super real.
Yeah, that reminds me of the kind of insidious traits that we also see present. So if you look at the examples of the ones that you just gave of The Hobbit, like Frodo Baggins, or you look at Harry Potter, both of them also experience the envy of their call to adventure. So there are others who envy their call to adventure, and often you find that, again, while we don't have our call to adventure, we may envy someone else's.
Yeah, well, that's also a very central observation, I would say. So the first story in the Genesis, in the Old Testament, the first story about actual human beings that are in history is the story of Cain and Abel, because Adam and Eve they're made directly by God. So the first two humans in history are Cain and Abel. It's a story of resentment and envy, right? And it's exactly what you just laid out, is that Abel aims up and makes the proper sacrifices, right? Say in the Abrahamic sense. And because of that, everything he does works. And Cain makes second-rate sacrifices and deceives himself and other people and God, and fails. And instead of learning from his failure, he becomes bitter. He shakes his fist at God and complains about the structure of reality itself. And then he becomes murderous and kills his own ideal. And then his descendants become genocidal. And then you have the flood. So that's another of the consequences, let's say, of non-existent adventure or false adventure, is those who took the adventurous path become the targets of envy. There's destruction that's then aimed at them, and that can propagate so widely through a society that it does itself in. And that's happened over and over in human history. Yeah, it's brutal, and it's so terrifying that's you could argue that Cain versus Abel narrative is, in many ways, the fundamental narrative of, what would you say? It's the fundamental battle of the most likely attitudes of each individual, right?
That is something where I find it questionable when highly academic people mix religious context. I was like, I don't know.
You can maintain faith and courage. You can make the proper sacrifices. You can aim up. You can be a benefit to yourself and others, or you can hold back what's best. You can try to manipulate the system. You can degenerate into bitterness and envy, and then look the hell out. Right, right.
Yeah.
And this is one paragraph, that story, right? It's like 12 lines long. It's a stunning miracle of compression. Yeah, yeah.
How does one transform that if one is experiencing envy of another's call to adventure, or envy of another one's path or success or reward from God, the universe, wherever it's coming from? How does one transform, purify, and rid themselves of that envy? What does one do with envy?
There are part of what has historically constituted religious practice is an answer to that question. So the first would be, you could practice gratitude, and you could make the case that if you're not screaming in agony because you're on fire right now, you have lots of things to be fortunate about. And people who have passed through extremely harrowing experiences, insufficiencies, the flip side of your insufficiencies are the opportunities that growth in those dimensions would represent. And that's a good way of looking at the world.
What's the insufficiency that lets us down the most? Is there one that stands above all others?
Pride. That's the classical answer from the Judeo-Christian perspective anyways. pride and arrogance. That would be something like the presumption that you're right, and that
I love that. I love just where you're using ChatGPT to improve, get answers quicker. I do that. You know what? To be honest, I do that too. I don't always use ChatGPT. I mean, ChatGPT. I use Google. They're sometimes I just Google to get some information quickly. So I dive in deeper if I want to learn more things. I definitely do that.
you're above it all, that you're on top. And you could see that as well, first of all, something very annoying to other people. So that's a problem, given that you have to put up with them. And it's also an impediment to learning, right? Because to be open to learning does mean, at least to some degree, always asking, well, what am I doing wrong? What do I have to give up?
And there's always free, I mean, if you don't want to use YouTube or AI, I've downloaded free finance books before. I've downloaded free finance books, so I don't think there's many other ways.
What do I have to let go of? What do I have to transform? That can be very painful. But so pride, that's one. That's a major one.
Oh, Justin, thank you for stopping by, bro.
Hedonism, that's a problem, and that's a kind of immaturity. So that's that desire for immediate gratification at the expense of other people, at the expense of you in the long run, right? At the expense of the general future. And so that's a very difficult thing to overcome. I mean, a lot of what you do when you're socializing children is you're trying to encourage them to become capable of integrating their various hedonistic desires so they don't conflict with one another, so that they can find their gratification in the long run in a manner that's commensurate with the needs and wants of other people. And it takes 20 years to socialize a child to become a full-fledged adult, and it's not like the process ends there. It's a very complicated process of integration and self-regulation. And it is upward. And why? Why is it better? Well, even if the goal is gratification, if one strategy allows 20 repetitions of gratification and the other strategy offers one gratification followed by regret and catastrophic failure, it seems pretty obvious, even by the standards of gratification, that the first strategy is better than the second.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the iteration element of it is crucial. Now, is this a long-term playable game? Better. Is this the kind of long-term playable, sustainable game that I would like to engage in voluntarily and maybe bring others aboard equally voluntarily? That's a good ethical question. It's also extremely practically valuable. We were talking before this began about the utility that you found in putting together around you a very functional team. Well, a functional team is composed of people playing the same game and all doing it full-heartedly and voluntarily. Yeah, well, so that's an optimal solution. Even if the goal is, say, the maximization of your success, your success that comes at the expense of other people, that means that your definition of success is thoroughly flawed. That's all it means. That's especially true if the world isn't a zero-sum game, and I don't see any evidence that it is. There's no reason that your victory, unless you're envious and spiteful, sadistic even, there's absolutely no reason that your victory has to come at the expense of someone else.
I feel often, going back to your point on pride, I feel often our views of how pride shows its face are quite superficial, in that we think of things like ego and pride as bravado and arrogance and showing off, and those are quite immature, superficial. They're true, but you get what I'm saying? They're incomplete aspects. And I think today in the world, we see far more subdued, nuanced, hidden ways of how pride shows up in all of us and around us. One of which you pointed out earlier, which was like, I'm right, you're wrong. And this can show up on a daily basis, whether it's a comment section, a chat room, an online place, whatever it may be, that there's a feeling that ego rules us, not in the I'm the boss and you're lower down, but in I'm right and you're wrong, and my way is the best way, and my political party, my God, my whatever it may be, is better than yours.
Yeah, well, some of that is the attempt to obtain status, and sometimes that's predicated on the erroneous assumption that if you defeat someone, let's say in an argument, that you're right. Now, there's a certain amount of truth in that, because you can evaluate ideas in the ideational space, but you can be intelligent and unwise and defeat someone wise and less articulate in an argument and still be profoundly wrong. I mean, what you should be trying to do, and this is especially true in the confines, let's say, of a marital relationship, is you should be trying to listen. It's like, and maybe,
You know, just that's 100%. I agree. Getting manipulated is really bad. It really is. It really is. And one of the things that why I believe that is a part of improving oneself is gaining that knowledge where you don't allow, or you try your best to be very hard to manipulate in a sense, and that's improvement by brain. You know, your knowledge, your way of thinking, where you see red flags. I think that's very important. That's why I constantly say having self-reflection, finding ways to expand your knowledge. You know, one of the things is, you know, being able to recognize red flags.
maybe you're trying to help your partner formulate their argument more accurately so that you both can get to the root of the problem. And
Oh, I love that.
the cheap way, it's very useful. It's like, well, you might have a point.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is actually one of the things that can help men in their understanding of women. So women on average are more sensitive to negative emotion. So you could think of them as having a lower threshold for alarm. Okay, now what that implies is that there'll be times when the alarm bell goes off when it doesn't have to, but there'll be other times when the alarm bell is going off to signify something that is barely detectable but is there. Okay, so often what women finds frustrating in speaking to men is the women will start to lay out the problem and the men will offer a solution. And the men think, well, don't you want a solution? And the women, who often can't articulate this, think, well, yeah, but neither of us know what the problem is yet. And so the initial stages in much couple communication are the woman bringing up a problem, but not knowing what it is. And so making all sorts of wandering attempts to specify the problem and hoping, even implicitly, that she'll have enough space, enough scaffolding so that that investigative process can come to focus on the actual problem. Well, once you've got the problem identified, it's a lot simpler to put forward a solution and to implement.
Really? Women don't know what the problem is when they are telling you the problem? Maybe that's interesting. Maybe I never thought about that. And I never and I agree, like men always say things to, oh, here's how to fix it. But women still don't know the problem. Is it that how men should communicate is that they should reiterate or say what the problem is so she could process it and know, oh, that's the problem? That's interesting. I really wonder if that's actually true. Our women really don't know what the problem is. I may have to, try that if it happens to me, But that's interesting.
But that's the case that's the case often for yourself if you're upset, or any dialogue. It's like you want to listen long enough so you actually understand what the problem is. And that's of great benefit to you, because now the cost is, if you're wrong, you're going to have to give something up. And that's annoying and difficult and complicated and can be humiliating. And then you might say, well, why bother? And the answer to that's straightforward. It's so you don't make the same stupid mistake again. And that comes at a cost. This is why there's this dawning insistence, a rising insistence in our culture that you shouldn't be able to be offensive in your speech, which sort of means you shouldn't be allowed to upset anyone emotionally. Well, if you're speaking about something that's foundational and you're pointing out an error, that's going to be upsetting to the person you're talking to, because it means they're going to have to do a fair bit of cognitive retooling. They're going to have to undergo a partial death and rebirth. Well, that's can be terribly painful, but it's better than actually failing cataclysmically repeatedly in the world. So we substitute death in argumentation for death in actuality. That doesn't mean that death in argumentation is nothing. And because there is an emotional burden and an effort that has to be made, people are resistant to that. I'd rather show that I'm right so that you have to change. Fair enough, but you might be the one with the problem. I mean, that's a terrible thing to contemplate, but...
I find that, don't you think there's a need for both the delivery and the receptor to upgrade themselves? Because there's a sense that even the deliverer of a message, no matter how true it may be, if they're able to make it not more digestible I don't mean in a watered down way. I mean in a way that is not agitating, but truly impactful.
Well, definitely. I mean, you don't want to wield the truth as a weapon more than necessary. You know, and people might say, well, I hurt your feelings, but I was only telling you the truth. It's like, you might have been telling the truth at one level of analysis and lying like mad at another, because maybe your motivation was to hurt and you figured out how to use something that was nominally true as your weapon. And so at the very narrow level of analysis, semantically, what you said was true, but in the broader context, no, you're just a sadist. And so there are technical approaches to that to some degree that are coded in the law. So for example, if you're defending your
Now we'll continue that, but this is a thing where how I go about it, like at least with my channel, is where I say things where I believe, in essence, it's truth, but I'm not gonna say that I'm the most articulate or charming or well-spoken person. So for me, I'd rather just be blunt and just say what I think, and it's not in a way where I'm trying to be, I don't know, evil or just vindictive or just, I don't know, just talk in bad faith. I'm not trying to attack. So that is a thing where I get it, but at the same time, not everyone is very articulate with how they talk. Especially, here's the thing where my goal is an average person talking to other average people. That's the thing where I like to go about it. Not everyone is charming or, speak very in an academic way. That's the thing where, yeah, you can be blunt with compassion. Maybe, I mean, that's the thing where I try to be. I try to be blunt with some compassion. I don't really, how I go about it is like, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but how I go about it is that I don't try to call women out of their names. I'm not, saying really, like there's certain people, certain creators that really go blunt and just don't explain and just use it as a triggering clickbaity kind of thing. And I don't really want to do like that. I don't go about it like that, where I like to talk about things and maybe blunt, but I will explain things, and I'm not talking people. I'm not saying people out of their name. I'm not insulting people. That's how I like to go about it, right? A bit of touch, maybe a bit of morality. Not. I'm not trying to go about clickbaity kind of thing.
Yourself, you're entitled to use something approximating minimal necessary force, and that's a good maxim for communication. You want to deliver a corrective message in the most constrained possible manner. There's ways of doing this. So for example, if you have an employee and they've made a mistake, you want to bring up the mistake primarily so it's not repeated. And so one of the ways of buffering that is to bring the person in and to say, look, here's a bunch of things you're doing right, and we don't have a global problem. But in this specific case, here's what you did. This was the consequence, and this is what you could have done to do it differently. And then you close it by reiterating the fact that, having said that, I have confidence, for example, that you'll rectify this error, and people make mistakes, and the real issue here is whether you take responsibility for it and rectify it, and then the person can learn without being demolished, without being demoralized. And that's also a very good thing to do to yourself. Like if you see that you've made a mistake and you're guilty as hell and tearing yourself apart, you want to approach it with the presumption of innocence. It's like, don't assume you're any more terrible than you have to assume. Okay, then do the analysis and figure out what's the minimal transformation you can make that will suffice. This is also a good principle when you're arguing with, maybe you're upset with your partner, your wife or your husband. It's incumbent on you to figure out what you want, like what would satisfy you. Okay, so you have a problem with me. I wasn't properly appreciative for the efforts you made when you were preparing dinner. I was dismissive of it. It's like, okay, what is it that you wish I would have said? The person might say, well, if you loved me, you'd know that. It's like, yeah, but I'm stupid. So I need to know, what word should have I used that would have encouraged your efforts in that regard? And then the person can tell you, and then you can say the words. And you have to understand that there's going to be a certain falseness about that the first time that it happens, but it's something you can get good at over time. You may have to teach your partner how to reward you properly. And they maybe be pretty bad at it the first 10 times, and that might be annoying to you and them, and even false. But you can practice it, and it's worth practicing.
Yes,
So,
yeah, I read something similar to what you're saying in terms of how to give proper feedback. And it was in a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. And he talks about a 3-step method that the first thing you do is you share that we have high standards here, because you don't want to live in a world of low standards. You don't want to drop your company standards. So
Right.
you remind the person you're speaking to, we have high standards here. We have high goals. And the second thing you do is you say to that person, and I believe you can get there.
Yeah.
I believe it. I
That's
see
right.
it for you because, of course, they're still at the company.
Yeah. Throwing
And then-
some evidence in their
Correct.
direction would be useful in that. Here's some things, that I remember that you really did well.
Correct. That show me you can get there. And then the third is, here are what you were saying, here's that area, here are the steps that you can take, here was the consequence, here's a rectification. And I love that because we allow people to rise to high standards as opposed to hold them to them.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference between that in how society is functioning right now, where we want to hold people to certain standards, but we're not willing to help them rise towards them. And it seems like God in this conversation with Abraham is like encouraging Abraham to rise, not just pointing at a standard that should be held.
This is one of the things that you see repeated in the biblical stories, is that this is why there's insistence in those stories that whatever the divine is, it's something that you actually enter into a relationship with, because there is this element of, let's say, tolerance for failure combined with encouragement, right? It's not merely that what constitutes the divine is this unattainable, infinite standard against which you're always going to fall short. That's what a tyrant does falsely. It's more like this
Oh, I didn't read it. Just have a good walk, bro.
spirit of encouragement that a good father would put into play with his kids. You want to set a standard that pulls the child upward towards further development, but you want to put it within the range of their grasp. And so, does that characterize your interaction with the world? Well, I think it's fair to say that it is, because, we can fail without dying and we can improve. And so the notion that ideals can exist in concert with encouragement isn't an unreasonable proposition. And it is, I think part of the reason that God is represented, let's say, in the biblical text as a wise father is because that element of the divine that's discriminating but encouraging is paramount. And that is what you want in a father, for sure. You want someone who says, I think you're capable of being great. I really think that. And here's some evidence that you've provided that might be the case. But given that I believe that you're capable of that, I'm not going to let you get away with any deviation from that would be finally counterproductive. That's not care, right? That's the devouring mother who says, whatever you do is fine, dear. It's like, that's not love, right? That's actually the desire on the part of the person who's delivering that message to keep the person being communicated with in a continually infantile and dependent state, right? So it's a weird thing, because you need that discriminating judgment, which can be quite harsh. It's like, no, that wasn't up to standards there, buddy. But that failure isn't emblematic of your core self, right? The part of you that I really want to communicate is the part that's aiming up. That was sort of the agreement I had with my clients in my clinical practice. Like, I'm on the side of you that's aiming up. And that's an interesting basis for a relationship. It's like, I'm not going to accept everything you do. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to arbitrarily judge it or dispense with you in the case of failure, but our deal has got to be something like, we're trying to make things better. And so I'm going to be on the side of you that's trying to make things better and help you discriminate that part within you from the part that might be envious and aiming down and being destructive.
What still gives you hope, Jordan, in all of this that we're discussing today? Is there anything that makes you feel optimistic?
Oh, there's lots of things to be hopeful for. We're feeding twice as many people regularly as even the most wild optimists imagined in the late 1960s. Absolute poverty is being restricted around the world at a rate that's miraculous.
I think that's it's about to be over soon. So this wasn't the best Jordan Peterson's videos I've seen, but it was interesting. It was interesting to seeing his some of his ideology. So I thought it was cool. Again, some people might think it's a bit boring. I get it. But it's just nice to just dissect different kind of viewpoints, because he did make some good points about personality types and things like that. So I thought it was interesting. Hopefully you guys like it. Let's do this would probably be a drastic, definitely a totally different video. I wanted to check this out, but I might as well check it out on this one. So why not? So yes, this is a pretty drastically different video, right? So it's not the Jordan Peterson thing.
Not just the flowers scattered all over the ground that are broken, but also the hearts of single and gold-digging women in China. The loudest cries online come from them. A lady who claims to represent older single women said, Do older single women feel like breaking down on May 20th? I am breaking down, really breaking down. From the moment I woke up this morning until now, I haven't received a
I've heard the dating life in China has gotten really bad. I've heard it's gotten really bad.
single greeting. No one sent me a milk tea, let alone a gift or a red envelope. Do you think I should break down or not? The key thing is that there's something even more heartbreaking. Right now, I just want to give men gifts, send them rent envelopes, and order them milk tea. I want men to feel the warmth and care that we older single women can give. But I can't even find such a person. I want to be a simp right now. Does that make sense? But I don't even have the opportunity to be a simp. Do you think being a simp is bad? It's great. At least it proves you are still young, you can still feel moved, and you still have money. Older single women like me don't even have the chance to be a simp anymore. Do you think I should break down or not? The most terrifying is the combination of these gold-digging and single women. This woman is 39 years old and has been unsuccessful in blind dates for years. She demands a dowry of 580,000 yuan to marry her.
I am confused too. I mean, that woman is weird. That woman was weird. She wanted to simp for men, but she can't find a man to simp for. This is the thing where, to be honest, this is why I'd rather be blunt. You can't find a man that you want to simp for. Now you can't find a man. You can't find a man you want to simp for. Like she said, she's 39 and has been unsuccessful in blind dates. It's because this is the thing where, honestly, women aren't simping for men. They're not, because they're still so picky. 39 and you're still having problems finding men? Yeah, it's not because because you can't simp. It's not because you want to simp for a man, because your high standards, you can't find a man. That's the thing.
Today I want to speak from the heart. I am considered an older single woman by the public, 39 years old this year. I have a master's degree and have never been married. Actually, there are two types of leftover women. One is the ordinary single older women, and the other is a high-quality single.
What confuses me is she for sure opened her legs for someone already so, like, how is she having trouble with like all that? This is the thing with women. They would never have trouble finding men that would have sex with them. But women like this will definitely have trouble finding men to be in committed relationships with them.
Woman like me. I'm still single despite going on many blind dates because my overall qualities are too outstanding, making it hard to find someone who matches me. I don't want to.
At 39, she's saying her qualities are outstanding. This is the thing where I've said this. I want to say this more in my videos, that I think this is an epidemic. That we have average women. This isn't like, great. She has a master's degree. Who gives a shit? Great. She has a good career. Great for her. A lot of women gotta think, not everything can translate to the dating market. A man, your degree is great. You having a career is good, but it doesn't make you more attractive. It actually inflates your ego. And why I say we have an epidemic is that we have an epidemic that women, truly average women, they have overinflated egos. They overestimate themselves. They overestimate their dating market value. More and more women. This is the thing where, here's the thing where I'm showing you where even in countries like China, feminism is killing them. Feminism is killing the dating market for them. Just like it's doing for America. Just like it's doing for the Western world. Because honestly, feminism has created narcissistic, egotistical women. Women that think that they're God's gift to men. When they are just average. Beyond average. Great that you have a career. Great that you have a master's degree. It don't make you special. It doesn't make you one of a kind in men's eyes. It doesn't. Yes, I agree. I agree. Like these multiple dates, I said it. It's showing you that you know what, you're not worth it because this is a thing where you're not worth it.
Settle, so I remain single. I also found that men
And don't want to settle. That's the thing. That's the thing where this is why I would say these are an epidemic, because we have more and more women, average ass women, thinking that they're settling for men that's actually of their own dating market value. Here's the thing where these women that has master's degrees, has whatever, a good career, think that they should be with men that are equal in intellect or equal in education, equal in finance, and not even equal. And he has to be good looking too. Tall, good looking, shit like that. Faithful, monogamous to her, personality she likes. To be honest, it's like you're nothing special, because in a man's eyes, yes, a degree is nice. A woman that's competent is good. A woman that has a career, a job, that's cool. But to be honest, the problem is when she wants someone who is equal to her, well, the man that's equal to you, he don't care what you got. He don't care what you got. It's great that you got it, but it doesn't make you more attractive.
around me are very superficial. They only look at your appearance and age, not your inner qualities. No matter how high my education,
Not your inner qualities. Not your inner qualities. She's the same. Like how vapid, how delusional you say, oh, the men that you want only look at your age and your looks, not your inner self. Yet you don't even look at any man's inner self. It's insane.
or how excellent my overall qualities are, because I am already 39 years old, I have lost my value in the marriage market. Over the years, I have insisted that my dowry must be 580,000 yuan. I am
You insist on a dowry of, I don't know how much that is. That's a couple $1,000s. Seriously? Your inner self is probably just as old and ugly as your outer self. This is the thing where the absolute hypocrisy, absolute delusion.
looking for a first marriage with someone who has not married yet, not someone marrying a second or third time. So the only thing I can do is continue to wait for my true soulmate. These remarks directly scared off many male netizens. They commented, "You say average men are scary, but aren't average women just as frightening? Demanding a house, a car, and a dowry, 580,000 yuan alone would take us half a lifetime to save. Forget marriage, just bury us already."
This is the thing. This right here is the blight of your average men. Average men in China. How the average men here as well. The average men here as well. Women demand all these. The women demand men that are already built. Here in the US, women are demanding men that are already built. And what are men getting? Average ass women. These are average women. And you are demanding men that are already built. Yeah, I mean, that's got to be a couple $1,000s. That's got to be a couple $1,000s. I mean, I don't think it's small, especially convert, for the amount of Chinese men make. But that mentality is like you requiring him to pay to be with you, to give you and your family money to be with you. This is a problem. Men don't see the value. It's not equaling, okay? It's not adding up. The value for what he's getting, it doesn't equal what she's demanding.
The collapse of the simp economy has made it impossible for gold diggers to control simp's wallet. For single women, the dream of marrying a rich and handsome Prince Charming seems even more out of reach. Thus, on 520 day, a phenomenon emerged on one side, gold diggers getting nothing, and the other side, older single women lamenting, "No man pays attention to me." The so-called simp economy is a popular term that has emerged on the internet in mainland China in recent years. In the simp economy, simp describes those who are excessively attentive and overly adoring of the opposite sex, and the main point is despite their continuous dedication and attentiveness, they may not necessarily win the favor of the other person. The consumption generated by these simps in their efforts to please is collectively referred to as the simp economy. It must be said that Chinese capitalists have made a fortune off the simp economy. And those who are vain and willing to use their bodies and look to exchange for...
I do. I hate the term simp too. I really do. But this is a thing where I do agree that for the weak-minded men, people are making money off of them. People are making money off them. Like the OF creators, they are becoming millionaires off of these types of men. Literally millionaires off of these types of men. And it's just a sad thing. It's really sad.
Gifts and money, treating love as a business, are the gold diggers who rely most on the simp economy. They need men to buy for them. In fact, the rise of the May 20th festival is a consumer trap set by businesses. During good economic times, people don't care much about where their money goes, only whether they spend it happily. Only in economic downturns, when money is tight, do people become clear-headed and see through the capitalist schemes. The once romantic confession day, May 20th, is now labeled as, by many men, as Gold Diggers Day. The public opinion suggests this directly proves that men are waking up. In the past, the tradition of men unilaterally buying gifts for women led to unequal spending and returns for men. Sometimes, if they bought the wrong gift or not enough, instead of praise, they face criticism. Many now believe it's better to spend money on themselves or their families. Pursuing a relationship not only requires money but also time and effort. For simps, long-term dedication does not bring certainty, only increasing sunk costs. More
Yeah, it is like a hit piece. It is like a hit piece on the gold digging women. But this is the thing. This is like a lot of men are changing this mindset where, and maybe I am too. I mean, I'm not giving up on, relationships and shit like that, but I have changed my mindset where I'm using my money on myself, on my family, on improving myself. My mindset, my happiness, shit, whatever. So that's what I've been doing, so to be honest, I gotta say this, a lot of men, they neglect themselves. A lot of men, I believe, neglect themselves. We constantly think about other people. I mean, that's how I see it. I think men are selfless. They constantly think about others. So this is why men have high deletion rates. Because honestly, they don't think about themselves. They don't treat themselves well. They don't care about their own happiness. And shit like that. And they're like, I want to change that, We need to, focus on building our own happiness. Being happy with our own lives. And then we could be ready to maybe include someone else.
Moreover, in the current economic downturn, the pressures from unemployment and housing prices, young people are losing confidence in the future. Nowadays, many young people believe that making money is better than finding a partner. In the midst of busy working schedules, managing a relationship that requires significant financial expenditures has become a burden. When times are good, they might have indulged a bit, but when money is tight and expectations are lowered, they have to consider cost effectiveness. With limited funds, investing in a vague dream seems less appealing than spending on oneself and enjoying life in the present. Due to the collapse of the simp economy, businesses have experienced the worst sales on record for this May 20th. Scenes of 10 yuan for 5 bouquets and piles of flowers and garbage bins seems to be announcing to the Chinese society there is no way we're spending money for love. This was a scene on May 20th this year. The video showed beautifully packaged flowers, which used to be the most sought after items on this day, now reduced to 10 yuan for 5 bouquets at street stalls. Flowers, 10 yuan for 5 bouquets, 10 yuan for 5 bouquets. Despite this, there are still very few customers, and most of them are women. It's important to know that in previous years, these flowers were in high demand on May 20th. If you didn't reserve them in advance, buying on the day meant outrageous prices and uncertain availability. But now, piles of flowers are turning into mountains of garbage, and no one wants them. Previously on May 20th, the area around trash bins would be filled with beautifully packaged flowers.
That is crazy. That is pretty crazy.
Flowers and gifts. You could make more money by scavenging around a trash bin than by going to work. But this year's May 20th, trash bins weren't as lively. Most of what is discarded were flowers, and the occasional discarded gift was nowhere near the quality of previous years. With the collapse of the simp economy, there's not even worthwhile trash to pick up anymore.
And what is this? Women throwing it away? I mean, it's like, what's the point then? Then no dumb men are not buying that shit. It's like this is part of the thing where honestly it's the ego, the insane egos of women. What's this is the thing where why honestly the US have changed. Men are gaining more self-respect. Men are taking control of the dating market. Where honestly, why am I buying flowers for women who don't give a shit about it? Why? What's the point? Giving flowers to a woman where she just throw that shit away. It's like you might as well give her $100 so she could burn it in front of your face.
This young lady tried to capitalize on a couple's argument by scavenging for discarded gifts to make some money, but when she opened one, it turned out to be just a bag of dates. Look, there's a couple arguing over there. Oh my gosh, the gift is from Dior. I really don't understand how you can get rejected after giving a Dior gift. What's going on here? Dude, you're something else. Putting dates in a Dior box to give to a girl? I thought I scored when I picked this up. Do you think that's fair to the girl receiving the gift? She opened it full of hope, only to find dates inside. You don't even deserve me picking it up. No wonder you're single. Oh well, I'll take it anyway. Dates are pretty tasty and good for the blood. She also remarked, this year the gifts from guys are especially cheap. This video content creator tried to make some money on May 20th by picking up unwanted gifts from others, only to find that with the poor economy, there were no gifts to collect. Whose handsome guy's gift is this, left here? Come claim it. Let's get a close-up. I told you not to be a content creator, and here you are, out at night picking up trash. Maybe it's because the economy is bad now, so people are afraid to buy gifts, and we can't even find trash. But there are so many people picking up trash today. Everyone wants to get something cheap. Wow, we found a treasure. There's an Armani lipstick hidden in these flowers, just perfect for me. The person who gave the flowers understands romance, but we ended up with it. Those people who found LV and Hermes gifts today, where do you think they picked them up? It's all staged. On May 20th, the Chengdu metro station entrance became an internet sensation. The trash cans outside the station were piled high with beautifully packaged flowers, with no one claiming them. This scene sparked heated discussions online, with many female viewers expressing their feelings that their lives were worse than a trash can, which was filled with flowers, while they received none. The collapse of the simp economy is most accurately felt by merchants. Many flower shops, jewelry stores, and hotels hoped to cash in on the holiday, but reality dealt them a heavy blow. The owner of a Suibei gold store in Shenzhen recorded a video complaining that this year's sales were the lowest ever.
Based on the sales data from previous stores, the sales performance on this year's May 20th is probably the worst ever. For those running hotels, restaurants, and flower shops, how are you holding up?
Additionally, this hotel owner complained.
In previous years, the king-size beds for May 20th were fully booked well in advance, and prices would have gone up by now. But today, I noticed that on C-Trip and Meituan in Xi'an City, the prices for king-size rooms in all central business districts and popular tourist spots, like the Bell and Drum Tower and the giant Wild Goose Pagoda, start at 100 yuan. The prices are generally between 100 and 200 yuan, which is lower than in previous years. Including my hotel, we still have a dozen or so-called king-size rooms available. So I think the market is really struggling. Anyone thinking of investing in the hotel business should be extremely cautious.
The most noteworthy is the flower industry, which relies heavily on luck and has been.
You know, this video just showed me how, honestly, so many people make money off of stupid men. So many people make money off of weak men. Men that are overly romantic, needlessly. Because what does it get you? What does it get you? This is the thing where it just really clarifies how the whole world makes money off of men that have no dignity, men that will treat women like queens when they're treated like shit themselves. It's just like men who will bend over backwards for women who don't give a shit about them. The world is making money off of these types of men. That's just sad.
Significantly impacted by the economic downturn. For flower suppliers, May was originally a peak season for buying and selling flowers. It starts with the May Day wedding season, followed by Mother's Day, and then the climax with May 20th. Flowers represent romance, surprise, and a touch of joy in everyday life. The more people crave this sweetness, romance, and surprise, the higher the price goes, with the industry growing by over 10% annually due to demand. But the upstream of the flower industry is undergoing a massive transformation. Once prominent unicorn companies are now in decline. Amora Flora, the first listed flower e-commerce company, was forced to delist in 2019.
Yeah, I definitely. I guess, yeah, me saying weak is harsh, blunt, but yes, definitely manipulated men. I will definitely agree with that. I mean, weak is like being straight. I'm being like straightforward, being blunt. Hopefully it hurts. That shit come on. Because here's the thing. I'm saying this. I've been weak. Manipulated. I've been weak. And it's just, this is a thing where, to be honest, this is where we have to understand. Average men are different than top tier men, high value men, shit like that. Average men are most men. And most men are treated like shit. By the world at large, most men are treated like shit. That's one of the things where this community has helped me understand how the world just views men like shit. They do. They use men, they manipulate men. Men are always the underdog. Average men are always the underdog in society. They are treated like they're treated the worst. They are used, they're manipulated. I think it's so underreported how abused average men are.
Chill in the industry has directly affected downstream flower retail stores. The lady in the video is a flower shop owner. The prices of flowers in her shop on this year's May 20th hit a new low, and sales were dismally poor. Yesterday, I said it didn't have high hopes for this year's May 20th, but reality turned out to be even worse than I imagined. The price of flowers has taken a nosedive over the past 2 days, catching everyone off guard. A few days before May 20th, flower merchants stocked up at the highest prices. When I placed my orders on the platform, it was also at peak prices, but today, the prices have plummeted to rock bottom. How am I supposed to sell these flowers? Wholesalers are everywhere saying flowers are cheap now, but our flower shop bought at the highest prices. In the end, we're accused of customers of being a greedy shop. This is truly a bitter pill to swallow. This round of harvesting is thorough. Now, let's talk about the orders on that day. As of now, I've only received 10 orders, whereas in previous years...
I mean, Josh, I hope your mom appreciates you. I really do. This is the thing where I feel bad for any man that, for the women around them that treats them like shit, that devalues them, don't value them at all. It's absolutely disgusting, absolutely disheartening. That's the thing where it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a double-edged sword. I think what you pretty much are saying, like chivalry, being a gentleman, being kind, leading. I get it, but a lot of times, I'm seeing it. A lot of men seeing there's no value in it. There's really no value in it, especially nowadays. And this is a thing where, to be honest, how I see this is that I don't know if men, because here's the thing, I always think that men changed because of women changing. So I don't know. I don't know if that's going to fix things. I really don't. If men changing back or adapting will change it, it's very hard.
It was at least 20, so it's halved this year. A couple of days ago, people were still ordering flowers, but today my phone is silent with no orders. Even those who come to buy flowers are only buying single flowers or small bouquets. Some are even buying Mother's Day flowers late for their moms instead of May 20th flowers. There are hardly any actual May 20th orders. The drastic reduction in flower orders has also impacted the food delivery industry. A delivery driver complained, "Guys, I seriously suspect I'm having a fake May 20th today. They said there'd be tons of orders, but at 8 a.m. I checked the platform and there wasn't a single order. Can you believe it? Not a single flower delivery order. I noticed that today there are no flower delivery orders and no food delivery orders either. Can we get some rain to boost orders?" The hardship and struggles, as well as the booms and busts of the flower industry, is the upstream and downstream sectors are perhaps only truly understood by those who have experienced them. A former supply chain manager at Yihua Technology, Li Chunming, is now engaged in flower wholesale. Now, besides his wholesale business, he has also supply platforms like Hema and Ding Dong Maitai. Due to the short production and sales cycle of flowers and their severe price fluctuations, business like Li Chunming's have faced significant challenges, especially now with live streaming, e-commerce entering the industry. Downstream channels have quickly fragmented, and planning has given way to instant consumption. Each flower's journey through rapid transportation is a matter of life and death for the industry and merchants alike, akin to an adventurer's game. The flower market sometimes resembles the stock market. The more you sell without caution, the more you lose. Another player in the flower business, Yang Jing, entered the industry at the end of 2019, and he quickly became one of Hema's first suppliers. By 2022, his
Looks like that. It looks like that. It looks like it's their Valentine's Day.
Business has surpassed 100 million yuan. The fluctuations in flower prices allowed him to earn his first buck.
But I think it's evil. I think Valentine's Days are evil. It is just a way to honestly grab money from men. And you can see China's doing the same. China's doing the same. Grabbing money from men. Average men. I think it's an evil holiday.
Of gold in the new industry. At that time, he bought 20 stem bundles of Carolina red roses for 35 yuan from the growing season and sold them for 140 yuan on Valentine's Day, making over 1 million yuan from a single deal. During Valentine's Day, the prices of roses at the Dounan flower market could change hourly. Feud roses, which normally cost 30-40 yuan per bundle, could even be speculated to be over 300 yuan. But if you miss the right time to buy and sell, losing 20 yuan per bundle is quite common, and merchants have to fulfill their commitments regardless. Many flower merchants lament that during holidays, buying flowers is a gamble. Because flowers are perishable goods, unlike regular consumer products, they have a short shelf life and are prone to spoilage. They need to be quickly traded and distributed. Although daily consumption is increasing, holiday gifting still dominates the market. This means that many growing bases remain holiday-oriented, concentrating their harvesting and listing before the holidays. The sudden surge in supply and demand can cause flower prices to fluctuate wildly around these times. The once thriving flower economy gave rise to companies like Flower Plus, which marketed flowers using a blind box concept. During good economic times, the business model was highly profitable and had significant advantages in inventory turnover and loss reduction. But in the current economic downturn, losses have become commonplace. According to industry insiders, companies like Flower Plus, which primarily offer flowers subscription blind boxes, also make money from flower price fluctuations. Users pay 99 yuan and receives 4 random bouquets a month. When market prices are low, procurement costs are low, making it easy to earn customers to switch to cheaper alternatives. Therefore, while Flower Plus random shipping is excellent for managing inventory, making orders might lead to more significant losses. A flower merchant from Yunnan specializing in dried and preserved flowers, 4 to 5 yuan to 8 yuan, and at its peak up to 12 yuan. That surge in orders resulted in a loss of at least 2 yuan per order.
It's weird that she's talking about the flower economy. I don't know.
to switch to pre-sale and delay shipments, which led to a drop in his store's rating on the video platform. In contrast, Young Jing, who operates on a traditional wholesale model, came in.
Okay, now she's just diving in deep in the flower economy. That's the thing where I thought these videos were kind of interesting. At least the first half of this video, before she dived deep into the flower economy of China. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. Yeah, what do you guys think? You know, I said this in another video I did, and I think that this is the problem with a lot of westernized world or world nations that are being affected by feminism. Because here's the thing, what comes along with it. It's great that women are gaining equal rights. Women are now being able to work and all this shit. Yes, it's great. But what goes along with it is the poison of what feminism is. Because it's like the sexual freedom movement that women has. It's just made, honestly, women's dating life worse. It's made it harder, and in a sense, it's made it harder for men as well. So I don't know. I just, to be honest, I don't see the world going back to how it used to be. I see it more and more of our different nations are being affected and changed. I honestly think, because you see this, more and more nations, our birth rates are going lower, right? Women are getting married later in life, having kids later in life. It is what it is, but I think that's part of it. Because these women, although they may be getting married later, having kids later, they ain't virgins until they're married. No, they're still having sex. They're still, being with the chads, with the players, with the bad boys. So I don't know. I'm gonna see it. It's gonna be a problem throughout the world. So what do you guys think? So I know that it's not the same type of videos I make, but I think these are interesting. I don't want to always make videos of like I'm hating on women or whatever shit like that. So I figured different types of video. I think I like the Jordan Peterson interviews. I have others of other people I might want to check out too. It's just maybe just to expand my knowledge, just to listen to maybe long form podcasts and see what people's thought processes are. So I like those. And then sprinkle in a little bit of, other shit. So hope you guys think it was cool. I just want the truth. Like, what are women's true nature and beliefs? Like, if they actually don't know what their problem is, would be funny as hell. That's the thing where, to be honest, I think women don't know what their problem is. Because I've seen this more and more, and I'm processing and developing my own theories, and I'm seeing more and more that women are in conflict with themselves. That's what I'm saying. The traditional values and the feminist values, they don't combine. They don't. So they're in conflict with each other. So that's why I'm seeing more and more, and that's why I'm watching a lot of these different videos to build my own theories, right? Because I think women are in conflict with their inner self. I really do. To be honest, women more than men are actually in chaos with like women, the femininity that they're born with, while the masculinity that they are developing through life. So I think that's been a struggle inside women's nature. So I thought that was interesting. I think that was an interesting idea. So, that's the thing. Hopefully you guys thought it was cool. Like I said, I have so much content of the other things. So that's why I'm trying out different videos. No, I like the interest. It's interesting thing. Hey, rambling is all good. I love where your mind is. I love it. You are amazing. It's interesting. We definitely gotta dive in deeper with that. Let me see if I can find a video with women talking about that, because that's interesting. That is really interesting. So, well, I'll see what I can do. I want to see if I can find a video of women talking about stuff like that. But yeah, hopefully you guys like tonight's video. Please check out my other videos. Yeah, you guys are amazing. Love you guys. Just, you are amazing. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for giving me your 2 cents. I love your brain. It's great. It's awesome. But yeah, later, guys.